Let's jump into this first story talking about communist Cuba. This is where it's getting dark, man. Daily Mail reports, quote, the communists have lost control. First Cuban demonstrator is killed after police, quote, open fire on peaceful protest while anti-government reporter is arrested live on TV as unrest continues. Diubis Laurencio Tejeda, 36, died Monday in a suburb of Havana during a clash between protesters and police. Witnesses claimed security forces had responded to demonstrators with gunfire after they threw rocks. Social media activist Dina Stars was arrested live on TV by Cuban security forces on Tuesday. Cuban government launched crackdown on protest after large-scale demonstrations erupted on Sunday. Seems to be getting worse, man. I don't know. You seem to know a lot about communists, though, Jack. What's happening in Cuba?
Yeah, so, I funny enough, I always joke about this. So I spent almost a year, right, in Cuba when I was at Guantanamo, but because when I was there under the Obama administration, we didn't have a status forces agreement. We still don't have a status force agreement between the U.S. and Cuba in terms of that. So we were not allowed actually out into the island, right? So we used to have these T-shirts that we would sell on base that said, "You're here in Cuba, close but no cigar." Hey.
Oh, clever.
Well, and so I've always kind of wanted to actually visit the rest of the island, but I got really into just how Cuba works when I was there studying it because. Needless to say, let's just say that, while I was there for the detainee operations, we also had people who were there from an intel side that were not paying attention to them. They were paying attention to the broader, Cuba, the landscape there, the military, the politics. And of course, we actually had some communication with them, we would say across the fence, just in terms of, hey, if there's, because it's very arid there on that part of Cuba because of the mountains. So, wildfires was a big issue, just like in California. So that's something obviously would affect both sides. So it just makes sense to kind of have a monthly meeting where we sit down and talk. Yeah. And so what you're seeing now basically is, look, the Castros are essentially over, right? Raul Castro has, he's on his last legs. He's kind of cut ties.
He abdicated the throne.
Right. He's gone. He's gone. And so they know that the new leadership, who, by the way, who is still on Twitter, verified and able to tweet, right, throughout everything you just said, cracking down on protesters, killing them, arresting journalists in the middle of the street. He is allowed to tweet, but Donald Trump, of course, is banned.
Who is it? This is a Cuban leader, you're saying? The leader of Cuba right now?
What's his name?
Who is it? What's his name?
I forgot his name, man.
Let's find out. The man of the hour. You said a status of force agreement, Jack. Is that something that the government will officially do with another government when they are going to have military that is going to be out and about in the country?
So you need some kind of legal, you need essentially a legal purpose for being there. So you look at a country where the U.S. has overseas bases on a more normal, with a country where we have more normalized relations. So talk about South Korea, Germany, Japan. Those are kind of like the three big ones. Also UK, we have some people there and on a few bases. And so you would have an essential agreement where, okay, we are not immigrating. We don't need visas, right? We don't need any specific documentation other than the orders, right? And that's all covered under that status of forces agreement. So, of course, and, the sort of cynical view of that is like, this is U.S. imperialism, right? Why does the U.S. need all of these bases around the world? Why are they providing this blanket of international security? This is the way that Russia would describe it. This is the way that China certainly describes it, especially when it comes to East Asia and that sphere. But that's the basic idea, that status of force agreement. And you'll also see this in terms of, like, if you're going over somewhere for an exercise, like we do exercises with tons of militaries. And so the idea, or tons of countries around the world, Thailand, Australia, et cetera. And so the idea is that you wouldn't necessarily need a visa to go because you're going on orders, going on mission.
Is it the end of the world? we got China warplanes in Taiwan. We got South Africa's collapsing. You got the revolt in Cuba. Haiti. Then you've got in the U.S. Haiti as well. I mean, the dude gets assassinated.
It's like we actually kind of drove past that. It's like it's funny. Right? The president of Haiti is assassinated, and everyone just kind of says, it's Haiti.
Well, actually, no. What happened was the president of Haiti gets assassinated, and everyone's like, "Whoa, what's happening?" And then all of a sudden, everyone turns because South Africa lights up, Cuba lights up. So look, man, fourth turning. It might not be a world war. What if it's a global economic collapse?
Oh,
It's,
speaking of
Miguel Diaz-Canel, by the way. Miguel
I pulled him up.
Diaz-Canel,
Yeah.
I have a BlackRock right here. I got
great.
you a
So
BlackRock as well.
What
too.
you're
thank
seeing, what you're seeing now is, by the way, this is a reformation of the global order, right? This is a reformation because, for a variety of reasons, America, which, as I delineated before, which had maintained that system, and you can see the military power, but also the economic power and the cultural power of the United States. All of those have become diminished over the past decade and really over the past couple of years. Now, in the Trump years, there was this sort of like sudden resurgence. People were saying, hey, is the U.S. going to go back to that position? But then that was basically usurped by Biden. And so that path seems to be closed. And now people are realizing they are going back into what the status quo pro ante was prior to Trump, and the phrase, I'm going to say it and you'll all remember it, this was managed decline, right? We were told this again and again throughout the Obama years. The U.S. is headed toward a managed decline. And we were told, they used all these technocratic phrases to sort of explain, well, this is just the way, things are going, and countries, they rise and they fall, and this is normal. And, I believe in American exceptionalism the same way Greeks believe in Greek exceptionalism, et cetera, et cetera. That was the famous quote from Barack Obama. So this is the idea. And I want people to understand that this is being done by policy. This is being done by decisions, right? Human decisions, human agency that's made on behalf of the people in power that have made this decision. They've made the decision to outsource, right, U.S. jobs, which is outsourcing our manufacturing base, which is outsourcing our wealth, all of the secondary and tertiary industries and businesses and communities that would have thrived off of that. I was actually just up in Maine. We went up for the 4th of July, and it's great because you can go on the coast and there's all these sort of like old money cities and old money like beach towns, and you go 30 minutes away and it's all this post-industrial, just bleak societies where, former factory towns with the factories gone, and the workers, the families of the workers are all still there wondering, hey, what do we do now, right? We're still here, and we'd like to stay in our towns, but we're just stuck.
It's all done through. That's the interesting thing about policy. You can be an industrialist, you can run a factory, and through no fault of your own, the government decides they're going to put pressure on your business that forces it to leave the country. So of course it still comes down to the conscious decisions of a lot of these people who run these companies. But when they say something like, we're going to increase the minimum wage, we're going to increase the corporate tax, then we're going to do a free trade agreement for factories outside.
Yep.
It's impossible to compete. Let's say you make, Ian, you gave me this little, was it obsidian?
That is obsidian, is volcanic glass.
This is obsidian?
Yeah.
Wow, that's that. And how do they file it to this?
All right, they polish it.
Let's say, Ian, you have an obsidian
for you.
factory, and you make these fancy little obsidian
Now
stones.
we're talking. All right.
And you operate in
Hawaii.
New Jersey.
Oh, Jersey, okay.
New Jersey. And then they announced
Volcanic New Jersey.
Yeah.
Well, they import all the volcanic rocks.
Naturally.
So they announced they're going to
okay.
be raising the minimum wage, raising the corporate taxes, and at the same time, free trade agreements with manufacturing from China.
That's too much for my company to handle.
And you say, you know what? My workers deserve $15 an hour.
Well, I do
so
believe that.
I gladly accept the cost increase, and I should pay my fair share in taxes. All right, so you go over the numbers and you say to pay everyone $15 an hour and to pay a 20% tax, we're going to have to charge $5 for every beautiful obsidian stone. No problem, right? Then all of a sudden you go to Walmart and there's China stone for $3. And you say there's literally no way we can make the obsidian stones for $3. Well, China has slaves, and they can import these products for free with no charge. So your company goes out of business because it's impossible to compete with the slave labor that China uses.
And understand, right? This was the idea. This was actually the plan all the way back before when, and funny enough, right, prior to Occupy Wall Street, what was the big, I talk about Antifa a lot. I wrote the whole book about Antifa. What was the big sort of Antifa moment, right? It was the Battle of Seattle, 1999.
WTO.
And the WTO, and it was all about who getting into the WTO. It was all about China getting into the WTO over slave labor. And that was Antifa, right, protesting against China and very violently rioting against China getting into the WTO.
Those were Gen Xers. So a big thing at play here is Gen X was protesting at the battle in Seattle in 99.
And they were flying Tibetan flags.
That was second wave Antifa.
Then
yeah, exactly.
I wouldn't call them Antifa. They were anti-free trade. Like it was more classically liberal in a lot of ways, but they were leftists. And then 10 years goes by, and you get a little bit more than 10 years, 12 years, you get Occupy Wall Street. What's that? Millennials, with some Gen Xers who were at the WTO, but many of those Gen Xers, the WTO moved on, had families, got jobs, and they're gone. Now the millennials come in. It's been 10 years since Occupy Wall Street. 10 years, isn't that crazy? It'll be 10 years in 2 months. September 17th, 2011.
Zuccotti Park.
That was nice.
Now it's Gen Z. People who are 10 years old during Occupy who have no idea what it was about are now in their 20s, entering their 20s, and they're voting for people, and they know nothing about the Obama administration.
That's why I talk about the Federal Reserve like a chicken with my head cut off on this show, because we got to teach these people about what is at least part of the root cause of social disorder right now. And I think it's the privatization of our monetary supply.
Bro, look, Jack talks about the plan, the WTO in '99.
Again,
right?
this all goes back to it, man.
So, but it's as I explained. How you think that Joe Biden doesn't know what he's doing? He's called for those three things specifically. We're going to raise the minimum wage, and we're going to increase corporate tax so they pay their fair share, and then free trade agreements. And you wonder why all those things come together. It's to make sure you can't run your business. Now, here's the thing. These people who were 10 years old during Occupy Wall Street weren't even alive during the battle in Seattle, during the WTO stuff.
Right. They don't know any of this.
Now, all they know is they're growing up, and the system is broken, and the government should give them free stuff. And when you try to explain to them, dude, it's Biden. He's been doing this for 50 years. They go, shut up, fascist.
Did you see that they're going to be giving families $300 per kid?
Yes.
Until they're 18 years old?
Child tax credit.
This is how we afford this.
We can't.
So they're just going to print more money.
Bro, have you seen the consumer price index? What was the percentage it said? It's like 5 point something. It's going up.
Right.
Gas is up 45%.
It's insane.
Biden inflation. We're gonna. It's they call it, what do they call it? Massive monetary theory. And
modern monetary.
Modern monetary theory, but it's not modern monetary theory anymore. Now it's modern monetary practice, right? It's we can spend forever, we can spend indefinitely, we can, and when you hear the Fed say, "Oh, we're adding to our balance sheet, we're adding to the Fed balance sheet," right? Right. Well, that means you are taking on debt, which means when you're taking on the debt, you're issuing what? You're issuing loans to banks at the highest level, right? The reason that they are doing this is because they want all of you. They want millennials, they want Gen Z to become a renter class. Right, you will own nothing. You'll own nothing. You will live in the pod. You will eat the bugs. Right, you will own nothing, and you'll be happy. Right. That doesn't mean that no one owns everything. Right. Someone is going to own something. And that someone, as we're finding out now, is going to be Wall Street. That's going to be BlackRock. It's going to be Blackstone. It's going to be these massive companies that are coming in now and purchasing what? Real estate. So your landlord, right? We know how much Antifa loves landlords. Right. Yeah. Exactly. So you have corporatism, where these corporations from Wall Street are now controlling the land. They're controlling your real estate. If you want to go out, and this is the amazing part of it, because rent's just going to go up. And so who's paying for those loans? The renter is. You are. You are going to be a Russian serf.
Look how brilliant the whole college plan was. Everybody must go to college. Two things happened when they went to college. They took on massive debt they can't pay back, and they can't declare bankruptcy on, and they got indoctrinated with psychotic, cult BS. They told everybody to take it on. At the very least, if they don't indoctrinate you, they make you an indentured servant. Yeah. Now they're buying up all the houses. So if you want to live somewhere, they're going to say, but you got to pay us rent. Hey, we're a private company. If you want to live in my house, you got to pay the rent. And then when you give them problems, they'll say, we're raising your rent. Oh no. And you get kicked out.
So where are you going to go? How are you going to have any type of wealth formation? If you don't have wealth formation, how are you going to support a family? God forbid. And if you do somehow manage to be able to get married, to have a couple of kids, how are you even going to be able to generate enough wealth to pass something on to them? So you create, and this is something the left I used to talk about all the time, generational wealth, right?
Dude,
you're not going to be able to do that with the negative interest rates the way they are now. This is all done by design. And the manufacturing, where does it go? It goes to Asia. Why? Because they don't have our labor laws. You have slaves, essentially slave labor in China, in Xinjiang with the Uyghurs, that are building all of this stuff, so they don't have to worry about them. They're not getting the wealth. The wealth is going into the 1% of China, and who is that? That's the CCP. And this gets back to my earlier point before, when we talked about the Battle of Seattle, when people were talking about putting And this was Clinton, right? This was Clinton putting China into the WTO, and then later Bush 43, Bush 41 talked about this. Of course, the response to Tiananmen Square, he said, well, we just need to bring China into the global order. That was what was said again and again and again. People were saying Tiananmen Square, they're crushing students the same way that people are being crushed, the protesters in Cuba right now. Bring them into the global order, bring them into the global order. And they'll become more open. They'll become more socially liberal. They'll become more transparent. No, it was the exact opposite that happened.
But I think
we became more authoritarian.
But I think we were always more authoritarian. I think you just can't do it instantly. So look at what's happening now with what Joe Biden's saying about Civil War stuff. I mean, the way he's describing people on 1/6, the insurrectionists, the Confederates never breached our capital. Come on, man. And then you hear what he talks about, the FBI saying snitch on your neighbors. We're hearing that more and more.
Joe Biden wouldn't have to. So there's that refrain, too, that I believe people will say that, if the situation were hopeless, the propaganda would be unnecessary. Mm-hmm. Joe Biden's not going to Philadelphia, not going to, where I'm from, and giving a massive speech, standing across, the Constitution Center is down across Independence Mall from the actual site of the signing of the Declaration and the Constitution. He's not going to give a speech like that from a position of strength. That was done from a position of weakness. That's because the contradictions are accelerating too fast right now. The Hegelian dialectic, which the left used to move forward, they used to progress with, is happening too fast, and not enough people are able to keep up with it. That's why they realize that their critical mass is falling apart.
Thanks for checking out this clip from the Timcast IRL podcast. If you want to see the full show, come back to this channel, youtube.com/TimcastIRL, Monday through Friday at 8 p.m., where you can leave comments and super chat, and we actually will read your comments on the show. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and if you want exclusive members-only content, segments you can't get anywhere else, go to timcast.com, become a member, and we even have full bonus episodes. Thanks for hanging out, and we'll see you all next time.